Thank you, Joko. Matthew Hancock, the government says we'd be weaker, we'd be less safe, we'd be worse off if we left the European Union. Presumably that's true whether or not we'd renegotiated a new deal.
Well, that's looking at all of the different options available.
So even if the Prime Minister hadn't achieved a renegotiation, that would still be true?
Well, the good thing is that we did achieve a good
But if he hadn't, that would still be true?
Well, that's hypothetical. The point is that we did get a good renegotiation, and the fact that we get better competitiveness and an ever closer union ending, which to me is really important. You know, we got those advantages, so we can have the best of both worlds.
Yes, but even if you hadn't, you say it's hypothetical, that it's not, because the Prime Minister told us that if he didn't get a deal, I rule nothing out.
Yeah.
But so are you telling us if he didn't have a deal, he would have plumped for a future in which we'd be weaker, less safe and worse off?
Well, we'd be weaker, less safe and worse off if we left the European Union
with or without a deal.
Compared to what is on the table.
But also compared to the status quo before the renegotiation.
Well, the analysis...
Is that right?
The analysis is about the comparison of the good deal that we've got or leaving altogether. And so actually, you know, the question of what we're comparing is we're comparing the deal that we've got, which is positive for competitiveness. It ends this ever closer union.
I understand all that, but the point
Euro.
I'm trying to get you to address is if it is such a big gamble in which so much would go wrong, it has to be true it would have been wrong to take that gamble whether or not we got a renegotiation.
No, because we'd committed in the manifesto to have a referendum.
Right.
I think everybody's pleased that we're having the referendum.
Really? Including the Prime Minister?
Well, yes, because he committed to having it in the manifesto and now we're delivering.
But why have a referendum? I mean, if it's such a risk...
Why have a referendum? I'll tell you why.
Because, well, no, let me ask you, because you're saying it would be weaker, less safe, worse off, sterling would plummet, uncertainty, tariff barriers, all of that, Sodom and Gomorrah. Why would you risk a referendum?
We're having a referendum because we have promised to in the manifesto, and we're fulfilling that commitment. And for years, politicians, you know, before my time, promised referenda, and they never got delivered. And now we're actually having one, and we can settle this argument for a generation.
Even if the alternative to leave, in your view, is so appalling.
Well, in my view, the deal which ends the drive towards ever closer union, which frankly had been going on all my lifetime, that gets better competitiveness, those are important changes. And that means that we can now be in the European Union, but not on a track to a single country called Europe. I think that's an important change. And then on the economics of it, which for me is paramount, and that's what brought me into politics in the first place, the economic security, ultimately. The economics are unambiguous, that the deal that we've got is better than the alternatives of leaving.
Well, let's look at some of these alternatives. Norway is one example that you look at and dismiss. You say that 75% of EU law has to be adopted by Norway, is adopted. What's that figure based on?
Well, that's based on this Foreign Office analysis.
Yeah, but what's that figure based on?
Well, it's based on what happens in Norway.
Really? Or what's the source?
Well, the Foreign Office have analysed the situation that happens in Norway, happens in Switzerland, in Canada, and looked at the WTO.
Well, I've looked at the figures. I looked at the EFTA Secretariat, which compiles these figures, and the EU doesn't in any way dispute them. Between 2000 and 2013, there were 52,183 legal instruments issued by the EU. Norway adopted 4,724. That's 9%. Where does the 75 come from?
Well, the 75% is from the Foreign Office.
But it's not. But I'm asking whether they got it. The EFTA Secretariat compiles these figures. Their figure is 9%. So where does 75 come from?
Well, it comes from the analysis of the impact on Norway. But the point is...
No, I've counted. Only 100 of these changes required primary legislation in the Storting, which is the Norwegian. Right. Only 100 out of 52,000. That's not 75%.
But a huge amount of legislation goes through with this primary legislation and the secondary legislation.
Yeah, that's the 4,724.
Right.
9%.
So, but the point is this, what you're not disputing, and what no one can dispute, is that if you choose the Norwegian option, then you end up with the rules and regulations of the single market. No, I'm disputing. I'm saying you end up with 9%. And you end up with the free movement of people that some people want to get out of.
Okay, how many...
You don't end up with... you end up with the rules without having the say over what the rules could be.
How many EU rules, because you get Switzerland as another example. Yeah. How many EU rules does Switzerland write into its law?
Well, I haven't got the figure on that.
Well, I can tell you, 0%.
The point on Switzerland is a different type of deal, right? They don't have full access to the single market, but they do still have free movement of people. So it's a different example.
Right, well,
to
they
Norway.
don't have access to
different
services, and the Irish services are coming. But there is, as you know, no single market in services.
But there is, and we're strengthening it.
Okay.
And part of the deal and the competitiveness deal that the Prime Minister brought back is all about our argument to strengthen the services single market, for instance, the digital market, which is getting stronger. And the key point is this. The majority of our economy is services.
Indeed.
And so to be in the Swiss position where you're not involved in the single market, you don't have full access to the single market, would hit jobs and it would hit prosperity.
So if not having access to the single market is such a disadvantage, and as you say, Switzerland doesn't have it, how come per capita Switzerland exports 5 times as much as we do?
Because Switzerland is physically much closer and surrounded by the European Union.
Well, that's got nothing to do with it.
Yes,
in
it
a
does.
digital age, geography is almost irrelevant.
No, because one of our biggest trading partners is Ireland, and Ireland's the only country that we've got a land border. Yes, and Switzerland historically has always been next to the
most of
countries
our
that it's next
exports to Ireland do not go through the Northern Ireland border.
But
you know that. I mean,
actually, that's not quite right. And the point is this. Around half of our exports go to the EU, but only around 1/10 of EU exports come to the UK. And that shows that in a renegotiation, were we to leave, then our argument for being able to export to the EU would be much more. We would need that much more than they would need the 10% from us.
If not having full access to the single market, again, is such a disadvantage, and I've pointed out Switzerland exports 5 times as much as we do, but if it is a disadvantage, why has America, Canada and Australia increased their exports to the European Union in the past 20 years far more quickly than we have?
Well, obviously, having increased trade across the world, because we started with a high position because Europe is next door to us. Increased trade around the world has happened right across the world. There's increased trade between the US and China as well.
Why have they done better than us, since we're inside and they're not? Why is it such an advantage?
But they haven't done better than us in absolute terms, but they are trading more with the world. That's my point. They're trading more with China as well, the Americans. But it comes back to this. All of these options have big downsides in terms of access to the single market, or you have to abide by the rules anyway. And what we don't know, and what kind of underpins this discussion of all the different options, we don't know what leaving would look like. We don't know what the option is that anybody who wants to leave is putting forward.
You also talk that Europe would impose tariffs on us. Of course, if they did that, we would impose tariffs on Europe. But why do you assume that that would happen at all when from Iceland in the North Atlantic to Turkey in Asia Minor, whether you're a member of the EU or not, there are no tariffs? Why would the Europeans pick on us?
Well, that's not accurate. If you look at the trade deal that is being done with Canada...
No, I said from Iceland in the North Atlantic. I'm talking at the outermost stretches of our continent, from Iceland all the way through to Turkey. There are no tariffs, whether you're in the EU or out, for goods. So why would the Europeans pick on us? Why? Because the only one that has them, and it's not in that line, is Belarus. Why would the Europeans position us with Belarus, which is what your paper assumes?
No, it doesn't assume that. It looks at what happens if we don't end up in the single market, if you choose not to do that, and therefore you don't have the free movement of people, then the WTO rules, the World Trade Organization rules, allow tariffs of up to 10% on things like cars. And in fact, only this morning, this isn't just coming from me.
But I'm trying to get to you. Why would the European Union, our allies, our friends, whether we're in or out, why would they pick on us when there's not another country through the whole European continent that has these tariffs?
Well, you've just named one, and Belarus.
Belarus
right? but also look at
Stalinist dictatorship. Are you saying the European Union would file us with a Stalinist dictatorship?
No, I am not. And but it may. Some of the people who want to leave argue for a trade deal like with Canada, and the Canadian example, even though it hasn't passed yet, the one on the table includes these tariffs. But the key point is this. you don't just have to take it from me, from the Foreign Office, from the Foreign Secretary. Listen this morning to the Justice Minister who wants to leave. He argued that, yes, tariffs in things like services and agriculture may go up slightly. Now, so you don't have to only take it from me, but what I want from people who want to leave is an explanation of what things would look like, because I care deeply about the jobs and livelihoods of British people. Ultimately, that's what's made me decide to remain. To vote to remain, because I care about the future stability and security of the economy.
All right.
And we just don't know what things would look like if we left.
OK, we'll be coming back. There's more questions. Don't go away. Coming back to Europe, are you worried that you will need Labour votes to win? You'll need Scottish nationalist votes to win as well, because your own votes, Tory votes, are likely to be pretty badly split. Indeed, you may even lose the referendum among Tory voters. Are you worried about Mr Corbyn's enthusiasm for Europe?
Well, the Labour Party is, as Ian said, pretty much united in favour of in. And there's a huge amount of Labour support for that position. So I think, there's...
But are you worried about Mr Corbyn's apparent lack of enthusiasm?
Not really.
You don't think that Labour needs to do more to get that Labour vote out?
Look, Jeremy Corbyn is not exactly the most appealing political figure to the general public. So what we need is the big voices who people trust.
So you'd be happy not to share a stage with him then?
I'm not planning on, but I haven't been asked, Andrew, and I think that he said that he won't share a platform with any of us. But it's not about that. It's about allowing people to decide. And but I don't think that Jeremy Corbyn's whatever his position.
Matters, is what you're saying. That's what you're saying.
The European Union referendum won't be won or lost on politicians. It's ordinary voices that will win or lose this.
No, but it could be won or lost on turnout. That's my point.
But I think
if you want to stay in Europe, you need to get that Labour vote out.
No, but it's not about Jeremy Corbyn. It's about the argument and the case that we're clearly going to. The economy will be stronger if we stay.
Barry Sherman's question was very accurate, because the Prime Minister should have been brave enough to say to the Conservative Party, "We have a deal. We're voting in." The fact he's not done that has a huge split, which makes it much more difficult to win this, and I think that's unfortunate.
It's exactly like 75 in the Labour Party. Final thought?
I think there are many people in the Labour Party who are slightly worried by the leadership's slight hint of equivocation when it comes to the issue, and they suspect that's one of the reasons why Jeremy Corbyn doesn't like raising it, because he doesn't want to get himself into positions. I interviewed Peter Mandelson yesterday and offered him an opportunity to be critical of Jeremy Corbyn. Very cautious about it, said no, Jeremy Corbyn's in the right place. There's a definite sense from the pro-Remain camp on the Labour side, they do not want to get into a fight with the leadership over this. And I think
during the referendum,
and they just want to keep it sort of, the ceasefire on Europe intact.
We'll have to see what we can do about that. James, thank you very much.